Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. As we hopefully get our committee members to join us. Welcome, everyone, to this joint hearing of the Budget Subcommittee number 1 and number 2 on early childhood education. I'm Al Martucci, chair of the Budget Subcommittee 2, and I'm very pleased to be joining Sub 1 Chair Ms. Weber for this hearing. Today's informational hearing will provide the committee with the background necessary to make informed budgetary decisions regarding California's early education system. Here with us today we have researchers, early childhood education experts, and representatives from the field to provide their perspective on the state of our early education system and ideas for improvement and reinvestment. With the passage of Proposition 30 and the Improving Economy, we have begun the process of restoring funding through our K through 12 and higher education systems. However, we must make sure to remember and to reinvest in the system for our youngest learners in California. As we all know, child care programs in California have endured devastating budget cuts in recent years. Since 2008, overall funding for California's child development system has been cut by over $1 billion, or 30%. This has resulted in over 110,000 children being displaced from subsidized child care, equating to approximately 1/4 of all child care spaces. It is time to start rebuilding our early education system. Research shows that investing in high-quality early education is a wise investment for the state, as it will improve educational outcomes, increase earned income later in life, and reduce prison costs. Today we will hear from stakeholders about ideas for improving the current child development system, as well as the proposal to provide transitional kindergarten for all 4-year-olds and restructuring the current system for infants and toddlers. And before I turn it over to Madam Chair Weber, I just want to say that this is we have a real exciting opportunity here with the promise of early childhood education. I think we've all heard many times that early childhood education is where we can potentially achieve the biggest bang for the buck or see the biggest return on our investment. But for me personally, as chair of Budget Sub 2, I would like to, as policymakers, as Budget Committee members in particular, ask the witnesses testifying here today to not only focus on anecdotal information, but to focus on data, on how do we measure the return on our investment, especially as we're going to be considering different kinds of programs, whether infant through toddler 0 to 3 programs, whether transitional kindergarten, whether mandatory kindergarten. How do we compare those different categories of early childhood education? So thank you very much, and I'd like to turn it over to Madam Chair Weber.
Thank you, and I too welcome you to this joint hearing. It is important that we have a joint hearing between Sub 1 and Sub 2, my understanding each year, for the purposes of looking at the issue of early care and preschool, mainly because these areas overlap significantly in terms of not only funding, but in terms of their goals and objectives of what they hope to achieve. We know lots of things about preschool and early education, and we have to begin as a state to implement the knowledge that we have about what is important in California and what really brings in the results and the dividends. All of us serve on a number of committees that are really responding and reacting to sometimes life's tragedies and circumstances that exist throughout the state, whether we're on the reinvestment committee with regards to our judicial system or dealing with the issues of homelessness and jobs and opportunities. And many of those challenges we face are a direct result of what we have not done for our citizens at an early age. And so as a result, hopefully this is going to be focused on looking at developing a real serious and investing in the plan that California has put forth as to what happens from 0 to 5, what happens for our children, and how we basically create that need. I recently was in Sweden, and it was really quite interesting because I was amazed at all of the wonderful things that happen from 0 to 5 in Sweden for young people. The support of parents, the support of the new mothers, the support of children, the preschool options and the choices that are available. And so it was amazing to see this, because then in the end someone told me in a survey that Sweden is probably the happiest country in the world based on the various variables that they use. And I can understand why, because of the investment they have at the beginning of life and the investment they make at the end of life. Every society will be judged by what it does for its young and what it does for its old. And so I think in California we have to make sure that we're sensitive to everything in between, but we surely pay attention to our children and pay attention to our seniors who have served us well. So I'm excited about this. We hope to hear some new things and good things, and we hope to, for once, after several years of cutting programs, to be able to reinvest in something that all of us know is very important, which is early care. So thank you so very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Any other committee members with opening remarks? Seeing nodding heads or shaking heads, we'd like to invite our first panel. The importance of early childhood education. Addressing this subject is Ross Thompson, a professor of psychology, Center for Poverty Research at the University of California, Davis, and Michelle Rutherford, Deputy Director, San Francisco Office of Early Care and Education. Welcome. Yes.
Madam Chair Weber, Chair Murasachi, Assembly members, I'm grateful for your being here to devote your attention to an important issue this morning, and I'm especially grateful for the opportunity to speak to you about them. My name is Ross Thompson. I'm a distinguished professor of psychology at the University of California, Davis. I'm also a member of our university's Center for Poverty Research, which has a focus on children in poverty and the intergenerational transmission of poverty. Improving the academic achievement of California's children and helping to close the achievement gap, preparing for the adoption of Common Core standards, and concerns about California's economic competitiveness have together focused our attention this morning and public attention in general on early childhood development. And the basic question is this: how do we help our young children acquire the skills and capabilities that will launch them toward educational success and a productive adult life? And it is well that we would focus on young children in light of what developmental science has shown us about the explosive growth of the brain and of the mind in the early years of life. By this time, you're all familiar with that basic story, aren't you? How neurons and the connections between them develop at the early years at an explosive rate, unparalleled at any other later stage of development. How these connections provide the foundation for brain architecture that will last a lifetime, with subsequent brain development building on the foundation that's laid in the early years. And equally importantly, how the quality of early experience is a critical component of brain development, with experiences that can either contribute to healthy growth or undermine the brain's functioning. And both are possible based on the quality of early experience. What you may not be aware of is that at the same time, intensive research in early childhood education has begun to identify what are the characteristics of preschool programs that contribute the most to children's school achievement and to later academic success. So I would suggest that we are at an absolutely historic moment when we have both the scientific understanding of the growth of the brain and an unparalleled knowledge base about what works in early childhood education to inform our thinking. And therefore this joint meeting is coming at an opportune time. And this is important because, as both of you mentioned, our investment in early childhood development in California lags behind our investment in education and health at later ages. But the significance of the early development of the brain and the mind warrants greater investment in the quality of early education. In addition, I would point out that young children are also, in many respects, more vulnerable than our older age groups to the conditions that impede healthy development. Young children constitute the age group with the highest proportion in poverty, the highest proportion living in homeless shelters, and close to the highest proportion experiencing neglect or abuse. And not surprisingly, these are the conditions that impair healthy brain development and in fact impair the healthy development of all a child's biological systems. The science of early childhood development is continuing to progress on many fronts, and what I would like to do this morning is to identify for you 5 conclusions from this research that may be helpful to our thinking today, and I hope will tell you something new. First of all, the effects of early experience on learning and cognitive development begin astonishingly early. And this is because children in the first 2 to 3 years of life, in other words, infants and toddlers, are establishing the foundations of language, number, skill, and self-regulation in a way that we had not appreciated years earlier. And thus, experiences in the home and outside the home significantly shape these developing abilities. You may know, for example, that by the time children are age 3, the size of their vocabulary at that age is based on the amount of language they have heard at home and how that language is used to talk with children about their experiences, to read stories to them, and to share new discoveries. By contrast, young children growing up in homes with little storybook reading, talking, and conversation have at age 3 a working vocabulary that is less than half the size of a child growing up in a more stimulating home environment. So, why is this important? Well, for 2 reasons. First, because it means that by the time a child enters preschool, the achievement gap is already apparent in their language skills and other abilities. The achievement gap that we have devoted a K-12 education system to trying to narrow is already widening before children have begun a preschool program. And the achievement gap between children growing up in more advantaged homes compared with those that are disadvantaged is likely to persist during the preschool years. And the second reason this is important is that we know that vocabulary size at age 3 predicts children's reading and language scores in 3rd grade. And literacy at 3rd grade is an important predictor of high school graduation, as you know. Stated simply, just as the foundations of early brain development are established in the first few years of life, there's growing evidence that the foundations of critical cognitive skills are also established in the infant and toddler period. That's new news. And this means, therefore, that for infants and toddlers, their experiences at home and also in out-of-home care are important foundations. This is important news to parents, I think, but it's also important for us because the quality of out-of-home care for the youngest children in California and in the rest of the country is not good, with many caregivers poorly prepared and compensated to provide the experiences that young children really need to get a good start in life. So that's my first conclusion from research. The second is, I think, equally important. Poverty and early educational achievement are linked. We can't think of them independently of each other. The young children who fall behind early are most likely to be living in poverty, and children living in low-income families tend to do poorly throughout the school years. And these effects are not just because of how many words children are hearing at home. It is also because of early stress. Very young children are stressed by poor living conditions, their parents' anxiety about economic difficulties, poor child care conditions, dangerous neighborhoods, homelessness, and many other conditions associated with poverty. And new research is showing that early stress has powerful effects on brain development, undermining children's capacities for learning and memory, as well as their health and how competently they can cope with the challenges they face. These effects begin early and they are formative. Poverty experienced when children are young has more significant consequences for adult success than poverty experienced later in life. Stated simply, the economic conditions in which young children live have profound implications for early learning that arise in part from the stresses associated with economic difficulty. And that's the bad news. The good news is that these same children also benefit significantly from a high-quality early education that helps them get back on track. And that leads to my third conclusion from research. The quality of early care and education is absolutely central. In some respects, investments in programs have a return to us only to the extent to which they are investments in quality. Young children in low-income families who are falling behind, therefore, are also likely to be falling behind because they're in poor quality child care and education programs. By contrast, we know that these children are likely to benefit the most from a high quality early education experience. We have learned quite a lot over the years about what constitutes an early childhood learning environment of high quality. It's an environment with a low adult-child ratio, with lots of language, lots of social interaction, with teachers and peers, warm, responsive relationships with adults who know a lot about early childhood development. A high-quality environment is a child-centered environment capitalizing on children's interests using a developmentally appropriate curriculum. It also involves connections with parents and with community resources that can support families. A considerable body of research shows that experience in high-quality preschool environments like these improves children's cognitive competencies when they reach school and can improve long-term outcomes such as high school graduation, number of years of education, adult workforce participation, and contribute to reductions in crime and teenage pregnancy. These are the programs that cost-benefit studies show can pay for themselves on the long run, by creating cost savings in later remedial education, public assistance, and improved tax revenues. And the research is showing that young children at greatest risk of falling behind academically benefit the most from their participation. I have to note, however, that the characteristics of quality change as children mature. A high-quality preschool program looks a lot different from a high-quality third-grade classroom because of differences between younger and older children in their self-regulation, their cognitive skills, and their social competencies. These differences between older and younger children are based, of course, in brain development. So what this means is that one size fits all is not true of early education. We have to think differently about the design of a high-quality education environment for preschoolers, transitional kindergartners, and grade school children, because children at different stages of development need different things from a high-quality classroom. The fourth conclusion from research may be a little bit obvious, but it's important to reiterate. Every environment matters for young children. Every environment. Even though our institutions and funding streams distinguish early education from preschool, childcare, and transitional kindergarten, each environment affects the developing brain, and each environment affects children's readiness to learn. We do not help young children at risk if we put them in a preschool program for half the day without paying attention to where they are cared for the rest of the day. We do not help young children if we provide them with a strong kindergarten program that's preceded by years of low-quality childcare. Stated simply, children's development is affected by all these environments, and their effects compound over time. We must be concerned with strengthening the quality of all the environments that kids are in because they all contribute to children's development. And my last conclusion is this. Ensuring quality means attention to workforce preparation, because researchers agree that the most important ingredient to early learning is a child's relationship with a teacher who stimulates curiosity, provides learning experiences, supports self-confidence, and creates a secure environment that minimizes the effects of stress. The quality of teacher preparation is, if you will, the active ingredient of a high-quality early learning environment that builds young brains and minds. We recognize this to be true in the education, preparation, and remuneration of teachers in the K-12 system. To a lesser extent, we also recognize this in the recruitment of teachers to staff high-quality preschool programs. But in the child care programs throughout California, especially those that serve young children who are most at risk of falling behind academically, teachers are paid so poorly that they often require public assistance. Until we have found a way to make the care and education profession an attractive career direction, it is doubtful we will be successful in bringing capable and committed young adults into the field of nurturing young brains and minds. But recruiting these bright and devoted young adults to the education of infants, toddlers, and young children is crucially important. And equipping them with the knowledge in teacher preparation programs, the knowledge of children's development that they need to do a good job, is an equally important task. I think these research findings have broad implications for your reflections about how best to invest in promoting the healthy development of California's young children. They have implications, for example, for whether it is best to design universally accessible programs in which all parents have an interest for their children, or instead to focus on targeted programs that reach the most needy but have traditionally been inadequately funded to serve that need. They have implications for the ages of the children best served. Should they be the youngest, the infants and toddlers? Should they be preschoolers or those closest to school entry in kindergarten or transitional kindergarten programs? and they have implications for the recruitment and training of a workforce that provides those services. I am currently serving on a blue ribbon committee of the National Research Council, the Institute of Medicine, that is examining these issues of early childhood education and preparation of a workforce that is ready to address those needs. So this issue is a national concern. All of these questions are complex. They involve multifaceted considerations. But I urge you to put the needs and interests of young children at the forefront in your thinking about them. There are certainly enough competing interests there. I'd like to help you focus on what children's needs are. I'm grateful for this opportunity to speak to you, and I welcome your questions and continuing dialogue if that would be helpful.
Thank you, Professor Thompson. Before we open up to questions, I think we'd like to hear from Ms. Rutherford. Before we go any further, I want to acknowledge Chair of the Budget Committee, Ms. Skinner, joining us. Ms. Skinner, did you have any opening remarks?
Thank you, Assemblymember Murasacci. I'll wait and ask some questions, and then perhaps after we hear all the testimony, have some closing remarks.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Rutherford, welcome.
Thank you, honorable chairs and assembly members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. And first I want to say I concur with everything Professor Thompson just addressed. I am the Deputy Director of the newly formed Office of Early Care and Education in San Francisco, and I've been involved with the implementation of welfare reform since 1997 and active as a First Five Commissioner and on our local planning council. And so I've seen sort of the evolution of our system and the recent years' cuts that we've had to suffer through. I was asked to address really the three questions before you in terms of why early care and education is important, sort of the state of early care and ed from the ground where I live, and ideas for improvement. First of all, it may be a no-brainer that early care and ed opportunities enable parents to work. It supports the state and federal goals of self-sufficiency in moving families from welfare to work. It provides a critical family support, which often isn't talked about enough in our discussions. It boosts California's economy through output jobs and tax revenue, so if you don't care about kids, at least care about that. It's an economic driver. Spending on ECE has a greater economic multiplier effect than most other industries, including the film industry. Licensed care contributes over $65 billion to the state's economy. And why early ed is important, you've just heard all the reasons why early ed is important. Early investments in 0 to 5 quality ECE programs for children, particularly those characterized in California's achievement gap, will reduce public costs at numerous touch points in that child and family's lives, saving public dollars as a prevention to delinquency, school failure, and future criminal justice, education, and poverty costs to the public and the taxpayers. Parents want what's best for their children. It's really the American dream. They want something better than what they have, and our early care and education system is the opportunity to help support our disadvantaged families and all families in the state by building a robust system that this country is so far behind with. It seems to me that there's this dilemma, or that the thing California keeps getting wrong is this juxtaposition between care versus education. And in truth, we need more care in education, and we need more education in our care, and to really develop this continuum of 0 to 5 with the appropriate developmental supports along the way, and not cookie cutter the different programs, or have these programs fighting for the crumbs that get thrown out. And in the recent federal ACF preamble for the Child Care and Development Fund, the proposed rules stated that CCDF is a dual-purpose federal program. So this is the funds we get from the feds that we build our system on. And the program has a two-generational impact. Low-income parents need access to child care in order to work and gain economic independence, and low-income children benefit the most from the high-quality early learning setting. Traditionally, CCDF has been understood as primarily providing access to child care to support work, with a secondary focus on supporting children's development by improving the quality of child care. We believe this purpose, and I'm quoting, access and quality are not competing but synergetic, that we really need to do both things and build a system that complements both areas. Without a comprehensive system of 0 to 5 early care and education, the policies in the state work against each other, and we're shooting ourselves in the foot as we go to try to do something different over here that doesn't adequately address the care needs, or something addressing the care needs that doesn't adequately address the educational needs. So we really need to look at it, and I urge us all to look at it in a whole way, and I think that's part of the purpose of this hearing today. Parents need flexibility in their subsidy support that matches the complex demands of their work and training schedules, including non-traditional hours, intermittent arrangements. Many families choose license-exempt care because of the flexibility, timing, and availability of that care. Some low-income families choose family members and neighbors because they determine it to be the best quality arrangements for their children, much the same as middle and upper-income families make that choice. At the same time, children need supports to their learning that allow for consistency of care. And so really thinking about minimizing transitions, if we're cobbling together programs, what does that do around transitions for children? Any quality provider, and there's a lot of them here, will tell you transitions are a critical period for quality care. And so we need to not build in system transitions that create problems in terms of children's development. So full-day, full-year programs meet the educational needs both of children. We don't want summer learning gaps for 3-year-olds any more than we want them for our 15-year-olds. And those Monday through Friday, year-round traditional hour care needs of families can be best met in that same way. So consistency and continuity. In terms of the current state of California's child care, there's many things that California is doing right, which is really exciting and we should all be proud of. You should all be proud of. In particular, California has a very strong mixed delivery system of contracted centers. A lot of states don't do that, and the feds are moving in that direction, and California is really a model. Having been a leader in that kind of contracting process, and it really has built up a lot of quality providers in our state. So our Title V child development system is really important, especially as it is with community-based operators as well as school districts and the Family Child Care Quality Network, so building up from mixed options for families with the complementary vouchers for families that fill in those non-traditional hour needs and other needs for families when access isn't possible. You've already heard in the statements in terms of what the cuts have been. We've all lived through them. They've been deep and painful. The state eliminated funding for a centralized eligibility list, reduced funding for local planning councils, for R&Rs. The CalWORKs child care allocations were capped and reduced. Center programs closed classrooms, relinquished contracts. Families were disenrolled, and children lost access to subsidized child care. For families that remained, license-exempt rates were deeply cut. The SRR and the RMR rates have been frozen, and fees were added to California State Preschool, further limiting affordability and availability. The alternative, I want to speak to the alternative payment agencies which administer the vouchers. These, I don't think it's clear to folks like what a hit APs took in the last few years. So first they had the admin cut from 19 to 17.5. That was a cut that was painful but looked reasonable in the spread of all the other cuts. But then the RMRs remained frozen since 06-07. Because they earn a percentage on the expenditures, that means they never got an increase over all that period that's been frozen at the old rates. And then on top of that, the state cut exempt care rates by 30%, which is over half of the caseload in the APs, which then left them with that admin reduction. So they got hit triple whammy. Our local AP took a $500,000 hit on the compounded nature of those cuts. And as a result, we really were left scrambling, having to restructure their contract to not be this percentage earnings in order to keep our AP alive. In San Francisco, in 1998, we had no problem having providers accept the vouchers. All of our providers readily took the vouchers at the 85% of the market. However, as the methodology changed for creating the market rate, and then as the rates remained frozen since 06, 07, and increasingly CDE made the reporting more and more complex, we now find that that providers have begun to refuse our children. So more and more, our voucher children don't have access to the market and don't have access, in particular, to our quality providers, which we know locally because we've had a quality rating in place for many years. So the most common explanation is that due to administrative burden and low reimbursement rates, they can't afford to take the voucher. In 1998, in San Francisco, the voucher provided access to 85% of the licensed market, and today, according to our recent study done by the Comptroller's Office and the Human Services Agency, they have access to 0% of our market. There is not one center in our city that is below the regional market rate. And the families can't afford to make up the difference. We have a very high cost of living. In addition, and then I want to speak to the 85th percentile of the market. In 2000, the 85th percentile of the market for preschool was $847. It is now, in our market study, the 85th percentile of the market is $1,573. That's what San Francisco families are paying for preschool. But our low-income families don't have access to those places because the market rate ceiling from the state is frozen at $974. And providers just simply can't eat the difference. In addition to the regional market rate suppression, so that's the voucher rate, the contract rate has always been abysmal, and our providers are hemorrhaging. It is really bad out there. Their boards are saying, you can't do this anymore. And we have providers coming to us saying, what can we do? If at their cost of presumably around $1,573, they're losing approximately $840 per month per child, more than half of it's not even 50 cents on the dollar, it's more than half on the dollar they're losing for every day of care that they provide. And that's even with some local supports, they can't make ends meet and are going to have to shut their doors. We've had many contractors give up their contracts, particularly public agency contracts, such as the San Francisco State University recently, and the public agencies in particular have trouble earning their contract because they're losing so much money for every day of care that they provide. So the current reimbursement rates really fly in the face of federal rules and will be particularly problematic under the newly proposed federal rules. So we should be watching out for those new federal rules as they come down. And in addition to problems with rates, CalWORKs families face barriers just in accessing care because of the intermittent nature of their care arrangements. So if they're approved for Tuesdays and Thursdays or 3 afternoons a week, but the providers have a full day cost, and it makes it very difficult for them to enroll or just have children there from 10 to 2. So this is a consideration just in terms of voucher access to quality and how we think about our system. So in terms of the direction that California is going, we certainly need to build a comprehensive approach to education and care and a 0 to 5 system that leads into our thinking through success in third grade. We need to regionalize the rates. The state rate process really doesn't work. For the state's too diverse and economically to have a standardized rate. And for both the SRR and the RMR with more current market information and pay rates that provide access and support and reward quality. Much as the previous testimony spoke to, our investment doesn't get us what we're trying to do if we go on the cheap, because then we're just allowing poor children to have poor care. And we need to look at the federal direction and where the feds are leading and make sure we're aligning what we're doing in California with the federal direction to complement that vision, and to use the opportunity for the quality rating and improvement system to really identify quality so that all families, not just low-income families, but all families really can identify what quality looks like and incentivize quality in the state. Thank you very much, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.